Guardiola just destroyed Mikel Arteta and Arsenal in the Carabao Cup final. And I say Pep Guardiola instead of Manchester City because this game was extremely tactical. It was Guardiola finding the edge over Arteta with the tactics. And in this video, I'm going to break all of it down. We're going to start off with the out of possession stuff and then move on to the in possession stuff because I think they're both really interesting and Guardiola found the edge in both areas. And to understand why the out of possession stuff was so successful against Arsenal, I think we have to go back and look at Manchester City versus Real Madrid in the first leg and understand what went wrong there out of possession, because the setup was this. It's what we've been seeing City do out of possession basically all season, playing in this diamond press, pressing really aggressively. It's the same structure Arsenal use and the same structure a lot of teams use, and it can be really successful if you have the right personnel in it, but you need the right personnel because the press is super aggressive. It's very narrow, and the idea is we're forcing Real Madrid to play the ball out into these wide areas with this front three. And the front three are successful for us, but the problem with this press for Manchester City is the fact that this second line of pressure where Doku and Savinho played is so demanding. You need elite pressers in these roles because say the ball comes out wide here to Trent, Doku has to be able to make this jump really quickly, and that's a really difficult jump to make. To be able to do that successfully every single time, you need someone like Declan Rice. We don't have Declan Rice. Obviously, Doku, Savinho, if Cherki comes in, these guys aren't as good at pressing as a Declan Rice, which means sometimes they'll miss the jump, and if they do, it just meant Real Madrid have really easy access down here. Not to mention the fact that, especially against the better teams, we still want to be +1 at the back. You can see against Madrid, we had Kushnov, Diaz and Guehi playing against Diaz and Vinicius Jr. for Madrid. We're +1 at the back, which means Real Madrid are +1 somewhere else. For example, if we reset this to what it was originally, they're 2v1 against Bernardo Silva here. So what we saw is that Lunin would stay on the ball, invite the press, and then Real Madrid would have a nice pass into either Pritchard or Tchouameni because Bernardo can't cover both of it. There were many structural issues with this press, and we saw Guardiola change it against Arsenal, which I think is what allowed us to win that game. If we look at the Arsenal press, it was completely different. It wasn't aggressive at all. It was very passive. Instead of being in the 4-1-2-1-2 diamond press we've seen basically all season, Pep Guardiola shifted to this 4-2-4, which meant Rodri wasn't by himself in the midfield because that was a problem against Real Madrid as well, right? If we saw a lot is Rodri just getting overloaded as well. Gula and Valverde coming narrow, and again you have another 2v1 in the midfield. He was completely outran, but by having Bernardo next to him in this structure, that didn't happen, and I thought Rodri had a much better performance against Arsenal. But what is the idea of this press? Because you might be looking at this and thinking, well, they're just going to play out wide, but that's kind of the point. We want them to play out wide. By sitting in this we're just blocking off any pass possible into these central areas. Nothing is coming through here, and we're forcing Arsenal to have slow attacks out wide. The idea is if they work it out here, there's not really a danger. We can shift across quite easily and then maybe force them to go down the line. They're not being direct, and therefore they're not really causing us problems. And Arsenal weren't happy with this kind of idea at all, especially with Kepa in goal. They couldn't really play this ball out wide, direct to wide. They had to shift slowly, which was very good for us. And there's loads of really good in-game examples of this. Here you can see the setup, right? We've got this 4, the 2 here, and then there's a back 4 as well. And Arsenal just didn't know what to do because they couldn't find passes into the middle here. So what we saw a lot was Kepa taking a long time on the ball. And Gary Neville criticised him a lot for this. But I don't think that's fair at all because I think this is completely instructional because Arsenal are trying to bait the press. They know they can't play through us here because there is no space centrally. That pass, for example, is what they want to play, but it just isn't on, right? So Kepa is taking ages on the ball to try and get Haaland to come and close him down, to try and get Cherki to come and close him down, to unlock spaces in this central zone so they can find those passes through here, which is where they want to play. But we were really patient. We didn't bite to the press. And that just meant we had periods of the game that looked like this. There were so many examples of this. I'll just flick through a couple of them now. Here again, you can see the same thing, the 4 in the press, and you can see Nunes a bit higher, right? He's ready to make this jump if the ball does come wide, which is nice. But then you're in a bad situation, and that is the risk of this system. For example, if you have David Raya in goal, I think he is capable of playing this ball direct. And then you have 4 players out the game who've been instantly bypassed. It is quite high risk. And it works with a goalkeeper like Kepa because he can't play that pass. He's always going to go short, which means you can shift and it's okay. But if you've got a David Raya who can play that pass, then you could have some dangerous moments. And Kepa did try to play this ball quite a lot. Most of the game was just him stood on the ball and we weren't pressing, which is nice. But there was one instance, I think, I don't know if I've got it here, but he did try and play it over to a Hincapié, and we just saw O'Reilly press and close it down and win the ball back. But I think with a better goalkeeper, this strategy could be risky. It only worked so effectively because Kepa was in goal. So now let's move on to the arguably more interesting in-possession stuff. And I think this is really funny because Pep Guardiola found the edge here as well, because Arteta has talked so much this week about how powerful man-to-man pressing is and how it's kind of ruining the league. He doesn't like playing against them. And what we actually saw in this game was Pep Guardiola easily play through Arteta's man-to-man press and Arsenal not being able to play through Man City's zonal press. So if you're a little pressing nerd, you'll like that one. But basically what we saw here is, again, Arsenal in their quite standard man-to-man press. However, there was a difference because we've got players like Erling Haaland, like Jeremy Doku. They weren't man-to-man all across the pitch like you'd maybe expect because they wanted the +1 at the back as well. They didn't want to be going 1v1 with Doku, 1v1 with Haaland. And so Ben White just stuck to Doku, which is interesting because, for example, when the ball comes over here, what you normally expect is Arsenal to push the fullback up against, in this case, Nico O'Reilly. But they weren't doing that in this game, and that allowed us to break their press because we have the free man, and we found that free man. But this was the Arsenal setup, right? You've got Gyökeres and Havertz pressing onto the front 2, which was normally Kushnov and Ake. Then you've got Declan Rice, Saka locking on man-to-man for Bernardo and Rodri. Bloody hell, what's happened there? But yeah, you've got these guys locking onto Rodri and Bernardo, and then you've kind of got Zubimendi in this free role because they want Ben White back. And Zubimendi's job was to cover the space in here, in this central area, but also if the ball... Jesus, I can't draw a line. If the ball comes out to Nico O'Reilly, for example here, Zubimendi would make the jump and try and cover this one instead of Ben White stepping up, which is really interesting because what that means is Cherki, who's playing in this free role, can't be picked up by Zubimendi, which means Trossard has to take a more conservative approach and pick up Rayan Cherki, which leaves Nunes as your free man here. And this is something we constantly exploited because we could have easy access into Nunes all the time, and then he's got all this space, right? Trossard can't come and close him down, because then you leave Cherki on. You just kind of have to let him carry the ball. And what this meant is we could consistently find Semenyo. There was a lot of talk in the first half about Semenyo had constant threat against Hincapié, but that was because we could get him the ball so many times. It wasn't because what he was doing on the ball was necessarily fantastic, but because we broke their press and Nunes could constantly get Semenyo the ball down this right-hand side. It was almost cowardly from Arteta, I think, here. Once he realised this was happening, I think he should have just changed, way braver, and gone man-to-man all across the pitch because Arsenal could not press us. We were consistently playing through the press, and I've got some great in-game examples of this as well. Because there were so many examples of us being able to get Semenyo on the ball because of Arsenal leaving Nunes as the free man. And ultimately, right, this starts with Zubimendi being the guy to close down O'Reilly. And you can see this here. What you'd normally expect is Ben White to be the guy jumping here and pressing that, and Saliba to be marking Doku. But that's not what we see here. Instead, Ben White is on Doku here, and it's Zubimendi coming from this position here to close down O'Reilly. You can see this here as well. O'Reilly gets the ball and he can just carry it forward because Zubimendi in this instant can't get across enough because he's playing that hybrid position, and he can just carry it all the way and give it Doku because Ben White doesn't want to jump and close him down because Arsenal don't want to take the risk of going 1v1. Again here, Nathan Ake on the ball, and he's going to try and play a long ball in here, but again, just notice the position of Zubimendi. He's in this hybrid role where he's not going man-to-man with anyone like we'd expect. He's covering the space because that allows him to still get something on this central area, but also make that jump if he needs to. You can see Trossard is actually who's going and man-marking Cherki, which is not what we'd maybe expect going into the game. And what this allows, like we talked about on the tactics board, is Nunes to have lots of space on the ball. You can see here, Trossard is in this inside role with with Cherki, and Cherki's just realised here, it's kind of the first time he notices how significant his position is, because before he was just kind of playing not really wide, but also not inside, which isn't doing a lot for Nunes in terms of being able to progress the ball. But what we see here is him actually really come wide for the first time, drag Trossard out the way, and create a passing lane for Nunes. And once Cherki realised this, whether it was Cherki doing it himself or an instruction from Pep Guardiola, it completely changed the game, and it allows us to dominate territory constantly, because every time we went forward, we could bypass Arsenal's press and find Semenyo. And this is the great example of it, right? You play it to Cherki out wide, he's got that access into Semenyo straight away. It's that easy. Same thing here again. Nunes on the ball. This time Cherki takes up a really interior position. He's very narrow, opens up the passing lane directly for Nunes to play into Semenyo here. And then he's in this dangerous 1v1. He can go byline, he can play inside. It's a really nice position to be in. Again here, this time it's Rodri on the ball, Cherki taking up this interior position, opening up that passing lane again into Semenyo on the ball wide in that 1v1 situation. A good situation to be in, and it's giving us the territory. Again here, Cherki taking up an interior position. Oh no, he's not. He's wide this time. What am I talking about? Cherki wide, Nunes into Cherki, Cherki into Semenyo. Really easy passing combination. And here is one of the times where Trossard came wide with Cherki, and this is a problem because it leaves the space in this kind of zone inside, and what it allows Nunes to do is just carry into the space, and that's exactly what he does. Carries it forward through the lines and finds Semenyo that way. Exploiting this 2v1 between Nunes and Cherki was so key for us, and you can see this on Cherki's touch map. So many of his touches are in this kind of zone on the right channel down here, which you just wouldn't expect normally from Cherki. Whether this was instructional or Cherki figured out himself, I can't tell you, but either way, it was genius from whoever came up with it, and it's what allowed City to win this game. I want to break down the goals now, and I think these goals are really interesting because they're so similar, and yet they're scored for completely different reasons. The first one, again, is us exploiting Arsenal's man-to-man press, and obviously a Kepa mistake, but then the second one is just absolutely genius from Bernardo Silva. So despite basically being the same goal, they're scored completely two different ways, which is fascinating to me. The first one here, again, what do we see? Semenyo coming narrow, dragging Hincapié narrow, Cherki quite narrow, dragging Trossard narrow, and this just allows Bernardo Silva to drift out here kind of undetected, and Rodri finds that ball. Then you're in a threatening wide position. Cherki makes a great run. He's dragged Trossard into unfamiliar territory, which is defensive territory. Doesn't want to be here. He puts in the cross, and then obviously Kepa spills it. Aït-Nouri, who's box crashed, not Aït-Nouri, Nico O'Reilly, who's box crashed here. You can see him coming in, scores the goal really nicely, gets in that 1v1 battle with Zubimendi, like we talked about before, and he wins it. But the second one is completely different, and that's because Bernardo Silva is genius here. And it starts with Doku, right? Here, where is the space for Doku? He wants to come inside here. Kai Havertz will know this. Naturally, Kai Havertz's run would be here to close down that space and force Doku out to the byline. Maybe he runs it out. You probably win the ball back here. Bernardo Silva also knows this, and he makes a really clever run. Bernardo comes wide, and what this does is it drags Kai Havertz wide as well. It leaves this space open for Doku to come centrally, and then he can find the pass over to Nunes. And then I think Gabriel makes a mistake here, right? I think Gabriel should be coming and closing down this 2v1 situation we've got, because I don't think he realizes Hincapié is behind him. I think he thinks Hincapié is probably somewhere else. I don't know, but he should go and close down this 2v1 situation, but he doesn't. This allows Nunes to play forwards quite easily, and we get into a crossing opportunity. Nunes in the cross. But here is where the genius comes from Bernardo Silva again. Look at Bernardo here. He's scanning. He spots Saliba in a 1v1 at the back post with Cherki. Bernardo now knows if he makes this run, he can drag Saliba towards the front post and leave Cherki free at the back. I think that's his intention here. I don't think he's really thinking about what O'Reilly's doing. And that's exactly what Bernardo does. He makes this run. You can see Saliba gets dragged forwards, and that leaves the space which O'Reilly actually attacks, not Cherki in the end. Saka's too slow behind him, and he gets a free header and scores the goal. But it's all because of Bernardo Silva's off-ball movement. It's absolutely genius. I want to finish this analysis just by talking about ball playing goalkeepers quickly, because I think there was such a contrast in this game, and this is naturally going to lead to some James Trafford starting over Donnarumma propaganda that you guys know I like to do. But we see such a contrast, right? Because Kepa was poor in this game with his ball play, and I think if you have a better ball playing goalkeeper, you'd expect them to be able to find this pass over our first line of pressure, and that makes our press basically null and voided, right? You can play through it easily and consistently almost every time, but Kepa couldn't do that, and therefore 4, our block, our press, whatever you want to call it, was really, really effective because Arsenal didn't have a great ball playing goalkeeper. On the other hand, James Trafford did really, really well with his ball playing for us, and that allowed us, even in the moments where we couldn't find the spare man in Nunes, to play through Arsenal's man-to-man press really effectively. Here, he's on the ball, we're in a difficult situation, Arsenal are man-to-man, there's not really an obvious pass. James Trafford finds a great long ball into Jeremy Doku, he can turn, we're out, right? It's really nice. Here again, James Trafford stuck on the ball. We can't find Nunes. Gyökeres has closed down this pass. It's not on. James Trafford doesn't have an easy option. What can he do? Finds a brilliant ball into Cherki. Again, he lays it off to Bernardo Silva. We've played out because we have a great ball-playing goalkeeper. If we have Donnarumma in goal, these get punted up the pitch to absolutely no one, and possession is turned over. Having a ball-playing goalkeeper is so important against man-to-man pressing, which is why I think Trafford should start. Again, here, Arsenal pressing. We could probably find Nunes here, but instead, Trafford plays a really nice long ball into Erling Haaland. And I don't think he wins the duel here, but that is not on Trafford, right? Trafford's played the great pass still for Haaland to try and win it. And if he does win it here, you can knock it back to Cherki. You're running on the front line with a 3v3 situation. It's a great place to be. Again, here, Trafford on the ball. Gyökeres closes down this pass into Nunes. He's in a difficult situation, but he's a great ball-playing keeper. So he finds a nice ball into O'Reilly, and just like that, again, we're out of the pressure. If Donnarumma is in goal, this does not happen, and Arsenal presses much more effectively. I will say it again, and I'll say it every time Trafford plays a game, we are so much better with him in goal because we can play through man-to-man presses, and we have this control. Anyway, though, that concludes this analysis. If you guys enjoyed it, hit subscribe, hit a like, get in the comments, let me know if you think I missed anything, what you thought of the game, and yeah, Man City, 1 trophy, Arsenal